Welcome to the Mexpreneurs Podcast, the podcast about the stories of Mexican tech startup founders who are building world-class, fast-growing companies and having a positive impact at a large scale. My name is Sergio Chavez. I'm a Mexican based in Germany, a tech startup founder, executive, and mentor, and your host. Today we have Hernan Arber with us. Hernan is co-founder and CEO of Soundwork, a music tech startup based in Netanya, Israel. Soundwork is reinventing the music industry's supply chain through AI and Web3 to create a scalable, transparent, and collaborative platform for musicians, producers, and fans alike. Soundwork's ecosystem includes three main pillars: a sound NFTs standard, a marketplace, and an AI-powered API for developers. Soundwork recently launched its fully bootstrapped MVP, including a Web3 marketplace, a white paper, and the tokenomics. Hernan is originally from Mexico City. He's an expert in AI, Web3, and blockchain, as well as a music producer, DJ, and a serial entrepreneur. He studied software engineering at the ITAM in Mexico before moving to Israel. In Israel, he first led technical teams at fast-growing startups and then started working as a consultant. He also founded multiple companies and professional communities such as EOS Israel. These experiences later led him to start Soundwork. I hope you enjoy. Support for this episode comes from Skyflare, a cybersecurity company with a mission to make e-commerce safe for online shops and which currently protects dozens of Shopify-based businesses through its 360 degrees holistic protection. As an online shop owner, you know that every cent you spend in online advertisement counts, especially in Google AdWords. Therefore, keeping a tight control of your budget and the ROI are essential. Nevertheless, there are bad actors out there who can make those costs explode. Skyflare's Click Fraud Protection solution helps you prevent and resolve those threats. At Mexpreneurs, we had the privilege to have Skyflare's founders in the podcast, including Juan Ocampo, a Mexican tech startup founder, and Skyflare's Chief Operations Officer. Visit skyflare.com/Mexpreneurs to learn more and also to get a 10% discount during your first 3 months of your annual subscription. Skyflare is at the moment available in Europe, Mexico, and Canada through the Shopify App Store. Hello, Hernan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sergio. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for being here. So, Hernan, please tell us, who is Hernan Arber?
I am a musician and tech founder. I'm originally from Mexico City, so Chilango from birth. I was born to Argentinian parents who came from Buenos Aires. After getting married, I was always the son of the Che. I grew up there, was born and raised, and I'm Jewish. It's important for the context. But I didn't go to a Jewish school per se. I went to the Ciudad de Mexico. And then later on, I went to the ITAM, Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México. That's where I made my studies of software engineering, which started being like telematics engineering, but then after a year study in Israel, in the Technion, in Haifa, I came back, finished the studies, and then moved to Israel, which has been my home since 2004, so 20 years actually this year. Married, 2 kids. I'm here in Netanya, which is like 20 minutes north from Tel Aviv. When there's no traffic, it can become also an hour because now the Ayalon has become like the periférico nowadays. But basically that's the geolocational story. And then there's, of course, the what have I done, right? So I'm very early on. I was studying from a very early age, I think 5 or 6 in the Conservatorio Nacional de Música. So I was a musician there. I was playing the clarinet, and then I started playing guitar at my teens. Once I came back from Israel and I started getting very deep into the electronic music scene, I got to a very special rave in Mexico where I said, okay, this is, I kind of found my people, as you could say. So I started making trance music. A lot of Mexican folks from the old school band might know me as DJ Eclipso. And then I created a band called Mind Delight together with Javier Calzada, which was also named El Loco. He moved to Australia. We made a lot of music. We got to play Cancun, Monterrey, in Mexico City. We did rounds. We also played in Australia, the Rainbow Serpent Festival, in Germany and in Japan. It was a very, very exciting ride. We released our first album in Phonical Records. And then back here in Israel, it was quite tough to make a living as a musician. And I started working as a developer, right? I kind of remembered I have this a software engineering degree that might help me out. So I started developing software, and then I got very deep into mobile app development. That was when the boom of the iPhone was on the rise. I got very, very addicted to Angry Birds, and I said, this is a different experience that we have in our hands. And then the whole thing changed because when I got into mobile, the idea that you could create an app from scratch with your two bare hands and release it to the public was quite new. So whoever was developing software before, generally knew that you were generally mostly kind of, if I was developing like ASP, so basically you were a little cog in a huge, like database administration websites. And then when all these SDKs and the Apple SDK came on, and the Xcode was giving you all the tools to make the graphic interface work and connect, that was kind of the moment where I said, okay, I can make this app all by myself. So I got a designing friend who made the cover for my first album, Namji, and I got together with Edwin, who makes even nowadays Function Loops, a very one of the top 5 labels in sounds and samples, and we made an app called Loopax, and that kind of started my entrepreneurial type of journey. Until then, I had done some development work, like a junior dev and a senior developer at a company, and I was even the tech lead for a company back then when it was 2017, when I was already doing iOS tech lead for a company, and then I got introduced to crypto. That was the ICO boom in 2017. I was introduced by the husband of a founder, one of the founders of the startup that I was working for. And I kind of went deep into the rabbit hole on a technological sense. And that led me to start digging into what is blockchain, smart contracts, layer one, and the whole decentralization narrative. One of the blockchains that stood out for me back then was called EOS. For the guys that are in crypto, they probably lost some money there. Long story short, I said, wow, this is like a new way of bringing scalability to this blockchain technology. So I said, let's go all in. I founded EOS Israel, which is the EOS community in Israel. So that was also a very intense, enriching experience on building community, getting people together, creating events, bringing businesses to build on EOS. I also founded EOS Israel. And then that kind of drew me to the Web3 blockchain path. I was still working in different jobs, but part of the being part of this community and leading some event led me to connect to a very special project called voice.com. That was this decentralized social network that they were trying to build. I made their event, and then I ended up being director of mobile development at Voice for like a year and a half. So I led 2 development teams, iOS, Android, contractors, QA, smart contracts. So that kind of propelled me into the more of the engineering management. Back then, I was just basically stepped from coding most of the time to just doing code review 10, 20% of the time and managing teams. So that was also a very good experience for team leadership, running one-on-ones, getting more into the developing more of the people skills. And then I guess I'm mixing kind of the music and the tech part, but I was always kind of doing music in the background, right? So after a long trip in Australia, that was before crypto, I spent like almost a year there, 8 months. We played the Rainbow Serpent. We wanted to make a second album, but it didn't quite happen. So I started my solo project. I got some tracks on Spotify. So if you want to listen to them, it's called AirNaN, but not with an H. It's AI, like air, the air you breathe, and NAN, AirNaN. Then back to the blockchain space, I spent most of my time, energy, focus, and love for the community for around 5 years since 2017 up to like the last cycle. So you could say 2022, 2023, even at 2023, trying to grow the ecosystem. My last effort was to build a project called EOS Starter. So that was a launchpad on EOS. For people who don't know what a launchpad is basically an incubator of sorts with the particular end goal that you end up selling tokens in an IDO style. IDO means what the ICO. So for the people that are really not into blockchain and crypto, there was a boom called the ICO back in 2017, which is the initial coin offering, where people were selling their coins before they reached the market. And back then, the only way to get listed on your coins was through centralized exchanges, Binance, KuCoin, and whatnot. Nowadays, and since the last cycle, it's called IDO because it's initial decentralized exchange offering. Why? Because nowadays, you don't really need decentralized exchanges to list your token to be traded. Nowadays, you just need a liquidity pool. So the way that decentralized exchange work is you have a liquidity pool, say you have dollars and pesos, right? And then you want to sell dollars and get pesos, so you just take them from the pool and you deposit the dollars, basically, and the price automatically adjusts according to the demand and supply. I'm trying to explain DeFi in a very, very simple world for the audience that is not into crypto. But then back to your starter, what I found out is that there was very, very few people building real projects on EOS. And so I started trying to becoming this hub of building projects. And I started helping around 6 or 7 projects. And then I remembered Lupax, the music making app that I made with Edwin. And I brought Edwin in and told him, listen, the industry of this, everything that we've seen in Web3 and with NFTs is just, basically Snoop Dogg launching his NFT and getting people excited to buy the track in NFT instead of listening to it in Spotify. But I'm saying, there's a whole market that is the building block, like the bricks and sticks. So when you see the music industry, it's like you're looking at a city where all the buildings are already built and the city looks awesome. And you're kind of only looking at the buildings, but those buildings were built out of, bricks and a layer of cement and another brick. And then, the furniture and all those building blocks are what is not being really tapped into music. And that is what led to the idea of building Soundwork, which also blends into my involvement into AI, because my last work was helping UserWay launch their AI product called Fix My Code. I was getting very deep into AI since basically I was getting very deep into AI back in the ITAM days. In 2003, my thesis for the software engineering degree is called Un sistema de secuenciación musical basado en inteligencia artificial. A musical sequencing system based on artificial intelligence. And back then, my advisor, I remember he told me something like, Hernan, this AI thing, right? It's not really intelligence, it's not really something that the thing you build is not really smart. And it's true, right? Back then, artificial intelligence was just a very complex tree of if, else, if, else, if, else, if, else. It was not really intelligent. But let's fast forward 20 years and look at where AI is now, right? So I got back onto the AI rails and I started very deep into prompt engineering, ChatGPT. So I helped out a company of a friend called Alon Mason named UserWay. That company recently got acquired by Level Access at around $100 million valuation. So that was very astounding. I'm very happy for him. I know they're going to make very strides in the space. Basically, I think that sums it up. It's a bit ping pong back and forth, but nowadays all my energy and focus is on building Soundwork, making the best music, AI, and Web3 platform that I can muster with my co-founders and my team. And yes, we're launching, very soon. We have like an alpha marketplace in the testnet, but I think we can delve into what is Soundwork later on. But that's me in a nutshell. I think I could still go on, but
this is fascinating, Hernan, and thank you for this fantastic summary. And it's just like this combination of music, technology, startups. You've had so many different roles. You've seen so many different things, projects, companies. It's fascinating. But what I'm very curious about, those major transitions, those, let's say, 10x jumps that you did in the process. But for example, one of the initial things that I would love to learn is like, why moving from Mexico to Israel? So it seems that you were already in the path of building a successful music career in Mexico. What happened? But of course, you already had experience some of the life in Israel. But what ultimately led you into taking the decision to fully moving to Israel?
That plugs into one of the first things I mentioned, which is that I'm Jewish. So I think that influenced a lot, because otherwise, I don't know if that would have been the case. But growing up, my only connection with the Jewish community was what we call the Tnuot Noar. That's in Hebrew, it means youth movements. My family is not religious, so we weren't really practicing Judaism unless we got invited, when there's a festivity. If we got invited, then we did the Seder and the Pesach and all the festivities. But if we were not invited, then it's not something that happened at home. That comes to saying that even being a secular Jew, so we were not religious, my connection with the Jewish community was this youth movement. And part of the youth movement, the goals as you grow up and you become like you learn like informal education. So you also become like a guide for the younger kids as you're growing up. And one of the goals is making this around a 1-year trip. It's like 10 months trip to Israel, where you go into kibbutz and you kind of learn the lifestyle. And I remember back then when I did the first trip, my idea was there was nowhere on earth I'm going to go to live to Israel. But then after being here for a year, I kind of really got connected. I got a feeling for the people. It's a weird sense. And I don't know if I cannot say if there's the same feeling would happen for someone that is not Jewish, but I really did feel like home, right? Like a sense of okay, I can make a base out of this. So that's when I didn't immediately come to live here. I came back to Mexico, started studying. Then I came for a second time. And then on my second time, I kind of made the decision that, okay, I think this is where I want to live. And it was not until after I finished my studies in the ITAM that I made the decision. The decision was one of the hardest decisions I made in my life, not only because I was leaving my parents and leaving my family. My parents are still in Mexico City, and my childhood friends, which I love dearly. Till this day, I have not made a core group of friends as my childhood friends from Mexico, Chema, Demian, Ruben. I haven't made this group of friends, and I've been here for 20 years, so imagine. But the hardest part was that we were actually on a rising path in terms of the musical scene in Mexico. So we were getting pretty well known in the scene. So it was like starting from scratch. My thinking there was, listen, I am also going to a place where trance music, it's like the thing. So it should not be strange for definitely be able to find an audience. And I did get to play some clubs and some open air festivals here in Israel. It didn't explode as the career that I was imagined that you always imagine to be. But basically, out of all the decisions I've made in my life, moving here to Israel is not one that I regret. I'm still proud of that. I still feel at home here. I'm a proud Mexican, Israeli, Zionist Jew that is even not completely Israeli, but not completely Mexican. So I'm kind of a hybrid. Even when I go to Mexico, I get this, tú no eres de aquí. I don't know if it's because I'm not the typical, I'm lacking some Aztec genes on me, but I feel Mexican through and through, and it's not like half and half, it's like a mixture.
And you're combining the best of both worlds.
I'm trying to. Yes, it is a cultural shock, because the culture in Mexico is completely different than in Israel. It was a cultural shock. Mexicans tend to be much more polite. We give importance in Mexico to the etiquette and the protocols. Mexicans tend to be much better behaved, much more polite. That gives us a sense of, of civility. Whereas in Israel, there's a word that it's hard to translate from Hebrew, which is called tachlis. Tachlis could be translated like to the point, like cut to the chase, something like that. It's like, tell me what you need, tell me what you're here for, be super direct. So Israelis tend to be super direct, which is a good entrepreneurial characteristic, but it sometimes comes off as like rude. You get a bit of a cultural shock, but once you get accustomed to it, you understand that the fact that the old lady beside you in the supermarket is telling you, no, 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 don't grab that milk, grab the other one because the other one's better. And instinctively you would say, like, what's up with you? You don't know me. Why are you telling me which milk to grab? You understand that there's a sense of this community that everyone's trying to look out for each other. So that's also good, because if you've been in Mexico City, it's such a big city that it's very easy to think that you're on your own, and sometimes gets lonely. That sense of, everyone's helping each other is also important. So the cultures are very different, but the core is that they are warm-hearted people. They're very welcome. They're very welcoming. They're very open, and they are always looking to make the best that they can and to help their fellow human being. That's important. That's in common. But the difference in how they treat and how we behave are sometimes completely opposite.
And also the other thing that I was fascinated with your career story is also how you basically evolved once you moved into Israel from the music scene, especially into the tech scene, and how you started working in some different projects and ultimately ended up building actually not only one bird, but multiple companies, organizations. We will be right back for a conversation with our guest. Support for this episode comes from Partnership Leaders, the leading community of partnership professionals and executives in SaaS and tech with over 1,500 members globally. We're living in the decade of the ecosystem, and every CEO needs to become a partnership leader. Just take a look at the top companies in the world today, like Microsoft, Google, and Apple. They have all become platform companies, and partnership executives in IT have been the ones leading these transformations. Partnership Leaders brings these executives together and is building a playbook to enable CEOs and business leaders across industries to transform their organizations into platform companies. If you're a tech startup founder, Partnership Leaders is the place for you to learn how to leverage partnerships to take your business to the next level. I'm a member of PL and co-host of the Germany chapter, and have seen firsthand the richness and value of this incredible community. Visit partnershipleaders.com to learn more and to apply to become a member. Make sure to mention in your application that Mexpreneurs referred you so you can receive a special price if your application is accepted. What I would love to learn is what drove you into actually becoming a founder yourself, Hernan? What was that driver into, okay, I've been participating in many of these different projects. What was that main trigger that drove you into, okay, now I'm going to sort of like take the front row and I'm going to start something on my own?
I will combine the kind of two main drivers, right? One is like the carrot and the other is the stick. The carrot is more or less the power word. I always felt a very strong sense of I needed to be creative, to be inventing, to be building kind of my own thing, to bring it's kind of my expression into the world. If you take a look at the products that I built, and it ties a bit to the music that I made, it's always connected to, in some part, to like who I am and how I can express myself. Building and founding a company, it's not only, identifying a need and understanding that there's a market need for what you're building and that the market size is good enough. And that, it's not always about what's the best opportunity and what's the best thing to chase. There is always an element of how can you bring your own self-expression into the building process. And I think without that element that links this company that I'm building, it's also bringing a lot of me into the mix. It's not really sustainable, because then you get very disattached. Of course, eventually you want to build processes and systems in place that you don't become the single point of failure for that company. So it's not all dependent on you, of course. But I think that's something that's very important, a driver to what drove me to build my own thing and become an entrepreneur. The stick part of it is that I tend to suck at being an employee. I tend to suck at jobs. I have this kind of basically there was always kind of a give and take with trying to do your best, trying to do the best for your job, and then getting into the space where you're being a bit micromanaged, right? And I remembered a very specific point in time when I was working for this company, NG, I was leading the tech. I was working my ass off because it was long hours and I was just coding nonstop. I remember that. And it was a Pesach vacation, a summer vacation where we got like a week off or 8 days. And I was kind of doing this. I wanted to go with my family, my wife and kid to a vacation. And I remember I was arguing with back then my boss, which was also like 6 or 7 years younger than me, because there are a lot of founders in Israel that, right out of the bat, there's a university called the ITC in Herzliya, where right out of the bat, if the project that they did for their final, like entrepreneurial path of their get selected, they get founded. And so you got a lot of founders that already raised capital and they're like 23. So I found myself like, arguing with my boss, 7 or 8 younger than me, almost a decade, for a couple or 3 more days of vacation. I remember going back and I'm not going back to this shit. Like, this is not the fact of the arguing or the fact that the boss was quite but this is something that I take from that point forward also with my teams. I never, in any company that I build, I'm never counting the hours you work or the time you're spending, or if you're working in the morning, in the night, if you're taking a long break. There has never been a time where anyone on any member of my team has told me like, oh, I need to do this thing. I need to take care of this personal issue outside. And I'll go something like, no, make sure you finish this first. That's not me. So my motto is, the work needs to be done. People need to be accountable. People need to be self-led. But as long as you're providing results, who am I to judge if you're working from 2 to 4 in the AM or you're doing an early bird? Or, that's when you are doing the work. The work needs to be done. At what time and what schedule? That's less important. So that's something that I take forward moving. But that is the stick part of what drove me to become an entrepreneur.
And Hernan, I know we're running short of time, so there's 2 more questions that I would love to ask you. First one is, what is still your connection to Mexico? You've been living in Israel now for over 20 years, but what's still your connection to Mexico? You were mentioning about your close friends, family, but also work-wise, and now with your startup, what are some of the touch points that you still have today?
First and foremost, my mama. So today is 10th of May, Feliz Dia de las Madres. I am still, the good thing that this is not going to be published is that there are some flowers on their way to my mom's house in Mexico. If you're publishing this today, 10 de mayo, no se olviden, you got to send something to your mom. My parents are still in Mexico. I talk to my mom mostly every day, almost. I put them the kids, the grandparents, and I was in Mexico a year and a half ago, as I think was September. So we were in Mexico. We got the chance to be at my mom's and with my friends. And David, my son, I speak with my kids only in Spanish, so they know Spanish. It's important for me that they're connected. That is on the family side. So on the personal side, I'm very connected to Mexico. I have almost every day, if it's not with my mom or my dad, a call with Mexico. I keep in touch with my friends. That is on the personal side. Mexico is still kind of my alma mater, where I was born and raised, my root. I still am very much a Mexican in every sense of the word. In terms of technology, for example, one side is that on the engineering side, on the tech side, many of my friends in the ITAM came to be like this prominent figures in Israel. Like Gerardo is like leading, I think, the Banco de Mexico, the Bank of Mexico. Sebastian, another friend, is the leading sales manager of Google in Mexico. So we went to visit him at Google. A lot of people have built amazing enterprises. So I met entrepreneurs also. Carlos Ochoa, saludos. He also was an Itamita on my generation. He built an amazing company, sold it, and is now like angel investing. A lot of amazing people are from my network that I built within the ITAM, which is one of the things that most stayed with me, like databases and what we started back then, has changed a lot, in the last 20 years. But the connections, the personal knowledge of the people stay the same. And the other thing that is also a very strong connection for me is the musical scene in Mexico. particularly the trance scene, the psytrance people that I'm still connected with in Mexico. So that also brings me a lot of memories. So whenever I look back on the DJ days in Mexico, I'm still in contact with Andreas and with El Sharigrama. So the people who know that trance scene in Mexico, they know the people, you know. I remember DJ Vasic was one of kind of the first DJs that I looked up to and kind of my mentor back in the trance scene. He's still playing today, Sounds of Earth. Go check him out. He's putting out great music. So he's a true OG in the electronic music scene in Mexico. And whenever I get a chance to connect with Mexican entrepreneurs such as yourself, Sergio, I take it with both hands. We know that there are a lot of tech, entrepreneur, Web3, crypto, AI podcasts out there. But when you contacted me and told me this is called Mexpreneurs and this is, you know, especially for Mexican entrepreneurs, it immediately jumped on top of my list and say, yes, this is something I do. So giving Mexico the spotlight, highlighting the very important partnership that we have between Mexico, being a little small vessel of a connection between Mexico and Israel, especially on the technology and music side, that is something I can be proud of and I wear with pride. And I do believe that when our dear project Soundwork takes off, it will help a lot of musicians and music producers in Mexico. And that's the goal, both in Mexico and around the world. But I definitely still dream of going to Mexico with a brand new set and playing for the old school people in the rave scene in Mexico.
And the last thing that I would love to ask you is your best advice for other aspiring founders that are listening to you. What will be that one thing that you believe is a must for them?
To pick one is super, super hard. I'll tell you three core characteristics, and then we can dive into one, whatever you want. But if I have to the top three characteristics that you must adhere to are focus, consistency, and resilience. Those are three properties that without them, you know, if you know you need to work on them, especially nowadays, you probably need to think twice before starting your own project. Focus is very hijacked nowadays, so this is something that you must know how to set your environment to have this very focused work, especially when you're creating, because when you're managing, you sometimes can have two or three things going on. When you're creating, your dedicated focus on one thing that you're building is essential. And of course, the consistency part, you know, explains itself because you have to show up, do the work. It's an everyday thing. And when you're an entrepreneur, you want it to be your own boss. Okay, so you're going to face yourself. Someday, if you're a very tough boss, you're probably going to get burnt out and you're going to be very tough with yourself. If you're more of a lenient boss, that I tend to be, then you have to force yourself and you know, you got to keep accountability with yourself. It's how you set up your environment. And then lastly is the resilience part. Being entrepreneurs, definitely one of the hardest things that I've engaged myself with, because it's basically a constant. I like to quote Alex Hormozi. He says, entrepreneurship is basically being constantly hitting the nuts with the brief moments of glimmer, hope, and vision of the future, and some small successes to start getting kicked on the nuts back again. But you do develop some very particular testicle strength when being an entrepreneur. So yeah, so get ready to get kicked in the nuts and be willing to do it. That's what it takes, but that's what we're into.
So focus, consistency, resilience. That's a fabulous summary. And then thank you for taking the time. Fantastic story. And of course, I'm looking forward to our next chat about the Soundwork and all the great things that you guys are doing. So I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Sergio. This has been awesome. And I also believe that this can be the beginning of a very, very nice friendship, even if it starts online. But, you know, you never know when the next time we'll meet in a cantina and have some beers. And, you know, I do look forward to it, definitely.
Likewise.
We'll do the next episode on a live setting.
Fantastic. Hernan, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Sergio. Muchas gracias.
And thanks to you for joining us today. Please remember to subscribe via your favorite podcast app to be notified about new episodes and share with us your feedback. We would love to hear from you. Thank you also to the Maxpreneurs team, Valeria Morel, Héctor Barragán from Hypervoltage, Francisco Jaimes, Pamela Elizalde, Katia Cruz, Rocío Marroquín. I am Sergio Chavez. See you next time.